This is Duel at the Midnight Glade. So I'm really excited to take a look at this project. The writer that did this actually was very kind and did some beta reading for one of my projects, and had some really accurate notes. So I'm excited to see, or some really thoughtful notes. I'm excited to see kind of what they have put together, and hopefully we can help, support them in their writing journey. All right, Duel at the Midnight Glade. The warrior walked in Wode's undergrowth. Again, that almost feels like a proper noun, and I know it's this is just like leading with a in world word is always tough. Consider more context. Because I'm like, well, I don't like that almost feels like a proper noun. It just I think it's directionally okay, but still needs a little bit of help. Anyways, the sun had long set beneath the horizon. I think I'm still streaming. Should I just do let's do editing, writing. I'll just do art. We'll do that one now. Well, shit, we'll call it art. Sorry, I was trying to figure out what Twitch category I should put on. All right. They don't have creative anymore, sadly, which I felt like was a good catch-all. The sun had a long set beneath the alley. Some of its light remained, dancing on the purse mist. So again, like in the first paragraph is generally when you want to be the most spare with kind of in-world or world-building words, right? So like Wode's Undergrowth, Purse Mist. I see you're trying to kind of immerse me in the world, but what a reader is generally looking for in those very early paragraphs is just someone to connect with or something that they can understand, right? And so, that's why a lot of books lead with character because I know what a character is or emotion, right? I know, hey, if someone's really ticked off about something, I can kind of say, okay, they're mad, and then the actions they take in this world will be what an angry person does in this world, right? So if we start with the world, we miss a little bit of the context as well. Also, this is a little bit of an odd sentence construction. I won't go super into the weeds on sentence level stuff much further on, but something to be aware of is, that first paragraph is everything, right? The sun had a long set beneath the horizon, yet some of his life. So again, this can obviously be like a lot shortened, like the setting, sun's light, danced. No. So again, if you just describe, those base clauses matter, right? And obviously my revision is not the perfect one here, but but you can always imply more by directing things forward. He's a poet, boss. He's a poet. Oh, really? Then maybe I've misunderstood. Actually, I feel like the poets are the most economic with words, and in this case, yeah. Poetry is poetry is really hard. I went to grad school with a number of poets. I have edited poetry. Poetry is something even I kind of shy from because it's very tricky. It's very economical. And so that's the thing. Like a lot of this is shortening the imagery. So setting sun's light. Okay, I know the sun's setting. I don't have to say the sun had a long set beneath the horizon, or like the remaining suns, like the sun's remaining light, or like the last dregs of the sun's light dance. And so again, because this is broken up into two sentences, you lose some of the impact because the verbs are kind of in weird places. So the sun had long set, right? So that's a kind of a very passive verb for your second sentence. And then you have a nut like so rather than just describing the action that light's taking, you tell me the state of the sun, and then you jump over for like that poet in the storytelling isn't efficient. The poet in storytelling isn't efficient. Potentially. I mean, some of that is like, hey, if someone's learning poetry, maybe they haven't gotten to that level of economy. But I definitely, at least in my experience, like poets that seem to really grasp their craft are insanely economical with word level writing, with language, and that is something that is when you come down to writing being a craft, that is one of the harder ones. Their leaves, it's like doing a tiny, tiny thread work versus weaving like a straw basket. You know what I mean? Like that's the where at least I've been like, oh wow, how did you make so few words communicate so much? And that's the trick, right? Is not just using the expressions those words are delivering, but their connotations, what we experience when we read those words. Like that's where poets really excel. And then rhythm and sound and the way those words add together and they create another set of meaning. So it's like using language to create meaning, not just the context of the words. And that's really tough, it turns out. Their leaves were great. Sorry, I digress. I digress. What was the theme of this opening sentence? We're walking through the undergrowth in the sun or the setting undergrowth? Walked in the road's undergrowth. Yeah, so I think there's a warrior walking through undergrowth right now. Their leaves were green after the rain. The shrubs and herbage seemed. So I know the herbage is generally going to be beneath shrugs, so you can take these little extra words out. And I won't be as persnickety going forward, but they seem to have been crafted out of the same emerald. Occasional wildflowers, red, white, and blue, added small touches of colors. So this definitely reminds me. So anything in this order. So even if you switched right, white, red, and blue, it would not immediately say America. uh, um, even switching the order will. So again, this is what I kind of meant when I was talking about connotation. When most people hear the words red, white, and blue in that order, they're thinking the American flag. If you're in the United States, and that's probably going to be where your English-speaking audience is, right? So just knowing that and saying blue, white, and red, that can give you the exact same thing, but it will, because essentially, like, you're just trying to, like, seed stuff into people's mind, right? And if you seed something in, like, a plant that you don't intend grows, like a weed grows, it's much more difficult to communicate what you are trying to communicate. They'll choke out the good plants. Um, so let me keep in mind. Added small touches of color to the otherwise serene. Why is it otherwise? So like, yeah, why otherwise? Is color. All right. Tomoe slowed down as she came up to the river. She had assembled, by her presence there, a cohort of creatures that had followed her through the woad to spy on her. They were gentle and forlorn things. Okay, so this is actually a really good note that I got from. I was thinking America too. See, and that's the thing. I love the Hads. Is this a first draft? I believe so. I'm not actually super certain. That's another thing too, right? My base clause. What is the verb of the sentence? That's the most important thing. And kind of like Ledna is saying, if you see a lot of hads in there, she had assembled. So like I said, her presence there, her presence assembled, right? Because that's the real subject of the sentence. Her presence assembled, I could spell, a cohort of creatures that had followed her. And you can even break that up. It depends on the sentence length you want, right? You could say a cohort of creatures. They had followed her throughout the road, they had spied on her throughout the road. So, like, again, this could be, sorry, I'm being really persnickety, but it's the early paragraphs, right? And later on, we'll go to more story structure stuff, I promise. Um, I mean, and obviously, Tommy saw moths, bats, mice, tiny owls, many shades which stayed hidden behind this reason. They all stared at her. So again, I like the mythology, but before it's introduced, I feel like I need more anchors into familiar. Scenes, emotions, universal frustrations that we all feel, etc. So yeah, obviously it depends on your goals as a writer, but you're making trade-offs, right? When you bring in a lot of in-world stuff early, it's you will leave your reader less anchored. I don't think that's your intention, but if it is, that's fine. But just know that a lot of these in-world words are going to start guiding me away from being able to really connect with the story, because it becomes a foreign thing rather than something I can immerse myself in, because I have to generally understand at least bits of it to be able to immerse myself into it. So like, there's something I can connect with. Is there emotion? Is she afraid? Is she frustrated? I'm guessing Tomoe is a she. I'm not sure. I think I saw they spat on her. Yeah. She. Okay. Um, Her golden hair gleamed into the moon like a sun in the summer, like the summer sun, right? Like, so, especially in your descriptions, you want to try to find the most economic ways. Her eyes, wise and profound, were gray and river drowned. Okay, so I was going to talk about this earlier, but I can also talk about this here. Is whenever you have two adjectives, unless it's really important, or two adverbs, any two modifiers. Omni third is really tough on me as a reader. I keep hoping to see character behavior and they say, hey, I'm here, instead of saying I was here. Yeah. Retrospective is a lot tougher, right? Because it's summary. It's a character. So you're doing three things, right? You're present in the scene. The character is thinking. So, like, it's in scene, in their head, and they're thinking about something that happened to them before, right? So it's very, very, it's much more complicated to pull that off, and that's why you see a lot of, like, if I pulled any of those novels off the shelf, they would probably be starting in the present scene. Even if it's in past tense, they would be trying to anchor me into a scene. That's just the way writing's evolved, more in the modern kind of literary trends, and yeah, it's totally valid to go against that. But film has influenced writing a lot. People are leaning more towards in moment, in scene stuff, and then that's one of the reasons why it does offer some advantages to the current audience. But again, kind of goes back to your goals, right? And that's why usually if I do more detailed edits, I'm generally asking the writer what their goals are. What are you trying to accomplish? If it's just kind of scene dressing and trying to make it feel like it's older timey, this is a valid option, right? Because a lot of older writing was written in past or in retrospective, because like that was just like a different approach to literature at the time. But again, it has trade-offs. You might estrange more of your modern audience. Her golden hair gleamed into the moon like the sun in the summer. So her wise eyes. So again, I would just do her eyes, her wise eyes instead of wise and profound. I think wise is a little bit more descriptive. Profound, I don't really know what that means. So that would be the adjective I would pull out, right? So like you could say instead of was, right? Because was is like were is those transitive verbs are interesting but not always super descriptive. You know, matched. You know, yeah, maybe matched the drowned gray of the river rocks. She was a star, yet within them She was with them here in the dark. I'm not sure exactly what that means. She smiled and cringed. So again, she cringed. She gave... What kind of look? So again, let's be specific. Don't get too attached, friends. I'm not here for long. There was no answer. She opened her mouth again, hesitating. But if you ever need anything, come to Terminus. We will help you. Every last one of you. They said nothing, only stared. She shrugged and turned back to the river with a sigh. An eerie mist rolled above it, dimly glowing as if it had ensnared the light of day. So again, whenever you see a lot of HADs and stuff in description, London was kind of getting to this. Because you should just describe what's going on. So, right, you could say the eerie mist ensnared the dying light of day. Whatever, and that works, right? So, like, well, also I notice, and I know I'm being really nitpicky, and I'm going to try to stop. It's very difficult for me because I'm very OCD. But whenever you're using the third person as to shift the camera, it's not always necessary. Right, like with a sigh, you could just do like, turn back to the river, period. I don't need a semicolon link to tell me that this eerie mist is rolling over the river. An eerie mist rolled, and ensnared the light of a dying day. It was a spy of the enemy. Not sure. Is this the river? It was a spy of the enemy. Blurring landscape only showed at west. Tomoe made sure to stay clear as she followed. What's the spy? The river? There he missed? Not super clear there. Tomoe made sure to stay clear as she followed the river to a glade where a pond maybe made amidst all its beds of... Yeah, and also if you all have any questions, feel free to stop me. Yeah, then it became redundant. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of... So remember, there's a lot of verbal doubling here. And this is something we talk a lot about. Like, anybody that's watched my edits before will roll their eyes, I'm sure. But it's a very good point, right? Usually in early drafts, I do this, everybody does this. They will say the same thing twice sometimes because they don't trust the reader to get it the first time. And usually the reader does, and then so it slows down the read, and it makes what could be a really compelling story read a lot slower. It really breaks your pacing. And so generally the best practice, thankfully it's an easy fix, right? You just pick the thing that said it the clearest, and you cut the other one. Yeah. Oh, the fourth time, yeah. Yeah, or just trimming them down is good, right? So made sure to stay clear, right? So this could be something that's much more descriptive, gives me more scene elements, steered her skiff away from the, curling mists. You can do and followed. So again, there's just some like little so there's always different layers to writing, right? There's the story, there's the prose, how we're executing that story on the page, and then, there's even the sentence level, and then the story can go back up to like theme and other things like that. So I know I'm focusing more on the prose layer right now, but I hope to jump more into the story elements. Followed the river to a glade where a small lake pool maybe set a bed of sea of grass. Tomoe went across the river towards the pond, but stopped in her tracks. This is kind of a cliched play. Anytime stopped in her tracks, find a better phrase for this, unless the cliche is intended. So anything that's idiomatic, you generally want to be pretty thoughtful about that. Because again, the real salties, welcome. Because again, it's sort of like seeding something. It's like seeding a garden. You're putting in more than you like. It's like getting a bag of seeds, but rather than your corn seeds, there's some weed seeds in there. So you're throwing other stuff that could confuse your reader or distract them or pull them off track. So essentially, you know, removing idioms is a way to purify those seeds you're throwing in that garden, and hopefully they'll grow on the reader side. Thinking of writing a story where the main character is an antagonist. Know any genres where I can go with that? There's a few. If you're looking for modern realism, there's quite a bit of that. Oh man, I read a book recently where they had kind of an antagonist main character who's kind of very self-destructive. I think I threw the book away after I read it because I had to read it for grad school and I still hated it afterwards. But yeah, other ones, the Brandon Sanderson Mistborn does a little bit of this with kind of the antagonist actually secretly being a protagonist. So there are a lot of techniques, and the protagonist, the Kelsier protagonist in Mistborn, actually is quite an evil character, and he's quite destructive. So that's also something worth thinking about. But yeah, let me know if that helps. He looked huge, even atop his horse. A black coat wrapped his shoulders. So again, was wrapped. Uh, you know, sat on his shoulders a little cleaner. Merging him into the night before a cloud, Tomoe steadied herself before choosing to reveal her presence. I already know it's to him. Who else is she revealing her presence to? She stepped forward as a nearby willow lowered one of its branches to stop her. She thanked it and gently put herself. So I do like this mix. I think this is a really cool piece of world building. Um, I like this world building mix of like sentience and nature, and these wielders that somehow commune with the mind of nature. I think that's a really cool thing you're bringing into your story. Villain. Yeah, I mean, yeah. So like a good example of this is Infinity War, right? The very first Infinity War movie. I think that's what it was called. No, Infinity War. Yeah, that's right. Infinity War. So Infinity War. What was who had the hero's journey in Infinity War? Who had to face death? Wasn't the good guys, it was Thanos. That Infinity War is really Thanos' hero's journey to save the world as he thinks he's saving the world. And the Avengers are the antagonists. So rewatch Infinity War if you're looking for some inspiration on and have your hero's journey or your Joseph Campbell nearby, because you'll see that the person that's hitting all the hero's journey beats is Thanos. It's not the Avengers necessarily. His voice pierced the knife. Are you Tomoe, daughter of the god Varil? He spoke softly, and his words were filled with menace. And as they carried with him all the silence. So I don't know what this means, so I would cut it as a distraction. Tomoe had come alone. I also know that she came alone, so I don't necessarily need this as well. We're again verbal doubling, right? And so in my work, and you'll see me, I do V2X, and you'll see when I'm doing my edits here. I actually got to slide this over so I can resume them. But when I'm doing my edits over here, I will circle something and write V2X in big letters, and that's because it's verbal doubling. So it's something everybody struggles with, and it's just something to just kind of watch out for in revisions, right? The horseman pulled the bridle of his horse and slowly crossed the river towards her. So again, this of his horse, um, you could do on his horse's bridle. So again, unless this is intentionally trying to be archaic, A true antagonist is the kind of someone. Yeah. So yeah, the book I was referring to as well has a true antagonist, a main viewpoint character that is an anti-hero, right? Someone who is self-destructive. So any books with anti-heroes, that's very similar. With the villain as the good guy, that's something like Infinity War, or with the villain as the hero. But again, it's all about point of view. Point of view is big, right? So who's the person that we're viewing the story through their eyes? Worth asking. And that's where you can do a lot of interesting things with the villains and the good guys. Who are we editing? Fear not, we are editing the work of No Slumber on Twitch. So he was one of our viewers. He sent this in, and I'm excited. It's very very strong. I know it looks like I've written a lot of stuff, but I always write a lot of stuff, so don't worry too much. But yeah, you were once loved and respected. So why did you give all that up? Was it hate? Was it fear? Did you come here to talk or to fight, half goddess? His voice danced like the wind, echoing against the trees in the game. So again, I like this approach to florid language, but I do feel like we're losing some economy and we're sacrificing pacing a little bit too much. The flowery language is is good for world building and setting us in this place, but I feel like it's beginning to overly impact the pacing. I still don't edit people project, but watching Boss, I feel better. Yeah, well, that's why I edit my own stuff on stream too, right? So you can know that I'm just as, you know, intense about my own work, and that's the whole point. Is we're just trying to, I know it's so difficult. I still sometimes just like, oh, feel heavy and bummed out when I see how much work my work still needs. But I think the focus that I try to really crystallize around is I just want to deliver a great entertainment product. I want to make an object that I can hand to someone and it will bring them joy for 10 hours plus, right? Like that's really hard to do. Like especially a static object like a book, right? Like that's really what you're building. And essentially you're coding a an imagination support experience, right? And so you have to think about how do I deliver this imagination support experience as effectively as I can to somebody. And it just takes product design, and you have to be merciless, or else and just knowing what trade-offs you're making, and trying to really hone in on what is the exact experience I'm trying to deliver. I'm not a half god. It's into banker, into voice. I'm here to listen to you. I don't know about that. Then listen to this. All that hides in the night beneath the shade, who fights them? So again, it feels like the ordering here feels a little odd. Like this dialogue, it feels like so like he says like listen to my sword being drawn, and that feels like we're starting a battle, and he's like no, I'm actually gonna give more context now, which definitely it does two things, right? It slows down the pacing a little bit, but then it also makes that dialogue feel a little bit inauthentic, right? Because if someone's really like listen to this and they're drawing their sword, all of my experience and my understanding of story means that they're here, they're getting ready to fight, and they're not so different from you. For your father left you forlorn too. Off you went for a war for great power. So again, this is a little bit explanatory dialogue. So the goal generally is to this explanatory dialogue is interesting, but it rings a bit too on the nose. Is there a way to rephrase this and communicate the facts of the backstory in a diff way. Kick them in the nards. Glittering points at downward thrust. Sparkling spears that never rust. Ooh. What's the answer to that riddle? I know the answer to that riddle. Now he rules in the tower, tall and silver, God married to the river, while you rightly lost. Um, she's now well within the reach of the sword and have an advantage if he attacked. Again, so this verbiage is a little odd. So essentially, we're saying if he would attack now, he would have an advantage. So again, those verbs, just set it to past again. Uh, if he attacked now, just set it to the he'd have an advantage. And I don't need to know that this is what she thought, right? So you're using free and direct discourse. We feel Tomoe is the third person viewpoint. So when using free and direct discourse, and if you are a writer, you should Google free and direct discourse, all those who are watching, because it's a very handy tool. It's like it's like the drill. It's a very, I'm trying to think of like good approximations, but it is a very useful tool in your tool belt, and it's one that I would recommend leaning on heavily because it's a powerhouse of a tool. We feel Tomoe is in the third person, so when using greetings NW and welcome. We feel Tomoe is in the third person when using free and direct discourse. We already imply that it's coming from that. The words are coming from her thoughts. You speak of shades, he said, but I know the night is not your master. Below is where your dark god resides, and his sinister mind does not tend to simply fall. So again, we're getting a lot of information, right? So the thing that feels off about this conversation is there are two people facing down sword to sword, and they are essentially telling the other person things that other person might already know. Like below is where your dark god resides. That feels like something that these characters might know just by living in this world. So this feels very expository, especially because it's not a good context for it, right? Like they're ready to throw down and have a battle. And so maybe the question to ask is, do I need to communicate all this exposition to tell this story effectively? This feels because this sounds like someone in this world would already know. Like something I already know. I know that's tough, right? Like it's a tall order to say, well, I need to communicate this to the reader, but what if the characters already know it? And so a lot of it is like finding situations that can make that happen organically, or ways to kind of imply. It's tough. I mean, a lot of it's just like reading how other fantasy or world building authors do it, and just trying to steal their techniques, right? And just saying, okay, he's using a fight, like they're mad at each other. That's how they're communicating. Or there's a scientist who just always explains things when they're doing something. That's what a lot of what Brandon Sanderson did in the most recent Stormlight book. He just used scientists who, because scientists just always talk out loud, to get a lot of world building across. Tomoe took one step towards him from the Jane Austen Center, and it's crazy. It's a powerhouse. It's a powerhouse of a tool. Tomoe took one step toward him, then another. She stood right in front of him, unarmed. The Ray staggered, unable to fathom. So again, this is a point of view shift. Really watch out for these. We've been established in Tomoe's POV. So jumping to, the Wraith, inner thoughts is jarring. Consider, Tomoe observing his discomfort, but we can't report it as interior fact. So again, this is a little bit of a distinction, but this is really important. Point of view. So there are a few things that will obliterate a read or make it extremely difficult, right? Like you might have some boring parts in your story. That's actually okay. You might have, a scene that doesn't work out or a character that people think they're not in love with. That's okay. You can still get through that. But the point of view can really break a read for readers. It can just so anytime you see a lapse in point of view, you really want to be on it, right? And so the problem here is that we're getting into the Wraith's mind, right? Tomoe took one step towards it, then another, until she stood right in front of him, unarmed. The Wraith staggered, unable to fathom as to why one would let themselves be so vulnerable. So that's coming from the Wraith's perspective, right? Like we're reporting that as free and direct discourse or as thought from the Wraith. And that is where we break point of view, because we've been in Tomoe's thoughts, Tomoe's viewpoint, Tomoe's understanding of the scene, and then we just jump to the Wraith. So that's going to be really problematic, right? So unless you're really doing some, there are ways to make it work. And unless you're really doing some, something complex and intentional, I would avoid this as much as possible, because it's like playing with fire. Yeah, you can make some sweet fireworks, but you can also, blow something up, right? So yeah, there is a possibility that like these crazy point of view shifts can really pay off and do some cool things. But if this is just a lapse, which I feel like it might be, I would just have this come like, like you could just have her wonder, like the Wraith staggered, Tomoe frowned. Was he confused at her, trust or something? So, like you can use one of her questions to give this impression. Shadows have forms too, only not theirs. You will always be bound to Master's will, Eridon. So shadows obey. Only obey. Only obey what hides the sun. I think the 2 is... Yeah, even Google was getting salty at that one. He smirked in his hand and reached for her throat, but Tomoe was fast. She cranked her arm back and punched him in the chin. How goes it? It goes well, NW. How about yourself? Having a nice evening, I hope. All well. Across the chest in continuous motion. Sorry, I'm going slow. I'm getting in the weeds, but I'll go a little bit more pacing through this so I can actually finish this, because I want to make sure that I have some high level notes and not just prose stuff. Sprinted as he had reached for his rope, the Tomoe was faster. She cranked her arm back and punched him. He stumbled, and she drew one of her swords and slashed him across the chest with one continuous motion. Okay, so she's fighting. Sparks of light flared from the contact of her blade with his armor, yet there was no blood, only shadows which spewed out from the cut like pus. He cried out in anger. So, pus and spewing don't really line up. So again, this is a nitpick, and I will try to stop doing these. But, first off, yucky. I think there's like, everyone is like, oh, I don't like the word moist, but I feel like the word pus is worse. Just winding down for a night, finally did a thing. Well, very nice. The Wraith staggered until I recognized an air of confusion. Exactly, Klondike. That would be a great way of phrasing it. I hope that the comments are showing up on screen, right? So, yeah, rewind the video and look at the comment that Klondike typed in. That is right on, right? Because that's still Tomoe's observation that he seems discomforted. It's like sort of when we talk with somebody, like if I'm talking with somebody at a business meeting, and I ask them about their company strategy, and they go, oh, and they put their hand over their mouth, and they look like this. I'm like, oh, Jeff was worried that his question made her suspicious that he was a corporate espionage spy or something, like so. But yeah, you did a better job than me explaining it, I think. So just rewind the video and find that chat. Okay. He smirked and his hand reached for her throat, but Tomoe was faster, carrying away the arm. Sparks of light, contacts blood. Kind of a image that might need reworking. Cried out in anger, movement ensued. and moving and sorting the forest as all things of shade scampered away in fear. Tommy backed away before jumping across the riverbank and into the midnight glade. The grass was longer, reaching up to her waist, as it grew undisturbed under the moon and stars. I think, again, this feels like over description. Like, because we're in a close third person, it's from Tomoe's perspective, right? So a lot of the description that the narrator is delivering, your readers will read it as the character like looking. So if I say like watch, it's 2 p.m., the reader is going to imply that I'm looking at my watch and it's 2 p.m. So in this case, because Tomoe's in the middle of a fight, I don't know if she would imply that the grass was grown under the moon and stars. Even though it's a very nice image, doesn't seem to mesh with the context. My thirst thoughts are Nevada, New Mexico. What is NW? My brain has been trying to figure out. My first thoughts are Nevada, New Mexico, North Wisconsin. I would say that it would be Seattle or Portland or Oregon, like Washington or Oregon. Northwest. That's what I think about when the Northwest. Finished my Galadriel enough for a little photo shoot the other morning and filled out in true form the Rose City contest. Congratulations! Well, you sound like you've earned a break, NW. Actually, would have never settled on that. The Northwest? That's kind of like, what folks call those. Anyways. But still, he came, and he was fast. He fell upon her like a hawk's shadow. So again, this is verbal doubling, and it's actually doing the opposite of what you want. By saying he was fast twice, you are slowing down his action, right? By having more words describe speed, you are making it actually feel like he's moving slower. And that's this balance between language and the implication of language and the context of what you're saying. So he fell upon her like a hawk's shadow. Boom. And I don't even know if we need this, but still he came. This is kind of your call if you want to keep that or not. I would not. He fell upon her like a hawk's shadow. The wraith would be weaker facing the light. Yet still. Or you could say like, but still, he fell upon her like a hot shadow. That's fine. Yeah, whatever. I know. I'm gonna be really OC. I'm trying not to. I'm trying to zoom out. I'm trying. She parried and dodged, and yet she was the one who had to back away. There were no openings in his defense. If it was a well of darkness, it was as if a wall of darkness was encroaching upon her. The wraith lunged forward, feinting and using his weight to push her off balance. Tomoe was not deceived. She moved as he did, gliding along his blade until she was close enough to be out of danger. I don't know what that means. Maybe gliding her blade along his until she was close enough to be out of danger, because it feels like she's just like you don't want to actually glide along a blade, and so because that would kind of mean like you're getting like eviscerated, right? She pulled her sword back in a circular motion to strike his leg, but she was stopped by this gauntlet. His hand smashed her face with terrible strength. Her vision turning black, she tried to keep her balance till the wraith, the shadow of the moon, and he rushed towards her and wrenched the sword out of her hands with one prize. Well, he laughed and smacked it. So again, register of language, right? So we've been using very formal language. We've been using, archaic and formal language. Smacked is a modern term. Struck might be more appropriate. So yeah, that pulled me right out of the story, right? Because he laughed and smacked her again. So again, smacked, not something that, at least in this like kind of, this feels like very like cherry blossom, like samurai battle, but spirits, so I don't see smacked as a word that would be used in that context, right? And so again, and you've been generally being pretty true to that, having them, like this dialogue, lords, gods, whoever trusted you, they were fools to send you to me. You are skilled, little star. So again, that's like not someone who says smacked, right? But you lack strength. You are weak. You get used by all. Tomoe rose to her knees, but her vision completely dark. Maybe she's doing the Matrix and dodging from the knees. That's a good point. Again, that's when you would actually want to add more description. If there's a really specific move that's happening, it is okay to have more description. And a lot of that extra space can be found by cutting down the verbal doubling, right? Tomoe rose rose to her knees. We don't need to know back to, but her vision was completely dark. The night sky disappeared, and so had the world around her. She surrounded by shadows, with only his voice reaching her ears. I see it from here, the burdens you bear for others, he continued. You don't need to. You can be formless and free yourself from the anguish that care brings you. You suffer for nothing, really. Tomoe's mind was assailed with 100 recollections of times she'd gotten hurt. Complete and sudden sorrow. So again, this is a great time for a list. This is a little too vague. So like, like so you could do like, of, So yeah, just really quick, snappy lists can do a lot. Lists are one of the most. If you read a lot of books, you will notice that some really good writers using lists. They're a powerhouse, and really good poets too. So usually, with the poets are doing it, it's probably good to keep an eye out for it. And so that's the thing, because this is a very vague time she's gotten hurt. That doesn't really tell me anything about Tomoe. Yes, like everyone, unfortunately has some experience that have hurt them. Uh, but because I don't like and it's sort of like that because the language is so abstract. I don't know what this means to Tomoe. Like for example, if like if I say dog to somebody, actually when I say the word dog, I want everybody to type in chat who's still here. Everybody to type in chat what came to mind, and I'll do it myself. Joe G, what's up? Good to see you. Yeah. Try not to look at the other people's answers. But you'll see they're very, very different because dog is a very abstract term. But what everyone's typing in is actually quite concrete, right? A Rottweiler with a massive head, like a scruffy lad, a Schnauzer with a fluffy beard. So, like a scruffy lad. So that's the goal with a lot of this stuff is precision, right? Because her pain could be like, an equivalent of a like every reader is going to have a different impression of what, or like Yorkie. Every reader is going to have a different impression of dog. Every reader is going to have a different impression of times they've gotten hurt. So you have to be really specific so you can anchor us all in the same place. Yeah, see you in a sec, Klondike. No worries. So that's why, like, you know, Tomoe's mind was assailed with 100 recollections. Blood on her sword from sacrificing a village. The orders that she carried out for father. The 10,000 sacrifices on the altar. Whatever. The blood dripping from the altar's sides. So, like, really concrete images and do a list, and it will give us an impression, which I think what you're trying to do without having to, like, tell her whole life story, which is impossible in a short story, right? Complete the sudden sorrow fell upon her mind in Graham's grievances. Why would she care what others do not? Detached from her own memories and humanity, she did not want to care anymore. She had come to help. Now she was dying. The wraith looked at her as shadows fell over her eyes. A strange impression that passed over his face. The fire faded from his eyes as he turned his gaze away from her, peering into the glade and upwards to the stars above. He shuddered before looking back at her. He realized he could turn her to his side, but she might prove to be dangerous to him. Already, what she told him ran circles around his mind. If he turned her, it might spell his doom. What did, though? I mean, I don't know. I didn't. So this didn't happen in the moment for me. I didn't see, the wraith really, like, shocked or, like, rocked by something she'd said. Besides general, disagreement. Yeah, I mean, for me, it felt like they were on two different sides of a philosophical coin. I didn't realize that she had really, like, blown his mind about something. From the nightly heavens, a single ray of starlight touched his sword and revealed its contour to Tomei in bright white light. Tomei saw her death then. She pulled back, shifting her hand to the second scabbard that hung at her side, and drew her sword in time. Yeah, again, for the blow to hit the half-drawn blade. That's a very... The verb is buried, right? She drew her sword to... Oops. To deflect. Right? So... And this is like a second or third draft thing, because, like, or fourth draft thing, right? Because in your second draft, you're probably just fixing the big story elements. But other than that, yeah, like, these sentence level things do matter after a while, though. Specificity is very important. Yorkie. Oh man, I want to have a little. Yorkies are always shivering though. They're like the furry chihuahuas, but they can be so chill, but they can also like really suck. One of my friends had like an awesome Yorkie, and then another person I know had like a really crappy Yorkie. The blade was of pallid silver. Sorry, I'm running along. I want to make sure that I have time to not make you all, go red in the face watching this review. Blade was of pallid silver, and in its sight in the night sky was brought back to life. The stars glittering diamonds in the sky now beamed with the light of the open goddess. The wraith cried in surprise as his spells of darkness were banished, and Tomoe's sight was restored. He seemed smaller without his cloak, and the edges could now be disconcerted. Desperate, his eyes darted for the shadow. There was nowhere to hide in the open glade. Down on one knee on the glowing blade that she held, took instead raising his sword before hammering it down on her. Tomoe rolled out of the way and quickly jumped back to her feet as it came for her again with the second assault. This time she was ready. She shifted her weight and raised her sword with both hands in front of her, blocking attack. She spun her blade around and knocked its helmet off. The wraith stumbled backwards, off balance. She lunged towards him and tried to back away. She was quicker. She lifted the moon sword high toward the stars before bringing it down on him. He screamed as the blade tore in the darkness, but a single blow was enough. So she swung again and again, and with every strike she shed more of the darkness that shrouded the man, until finally stood in front of the wraith no longer but a haggard man, young and frail, like he hadn't eaten in a while. So again, verbal doubling, right? Frail and he hadn't eaten in a while, very, very similar. But what's the stronger one? Frail. But again, also man and young is a little a haggard youth, but a haggard youth. I always have a soft spot in my throbbing, aching heart for purple prose. That's true. I mean, I actually think there is a place for it. There are ways to use flurried language, but unfortunately, sometimes it does. Like I feel like in this case, is this story because it's set in a world where there's kind of this very like we expect flurried language in this like naturalistic world with his connection to nature and the gods. Um, but in certain areas, it will break pacing. I didn't come here to kill you, Eridon. I came here to save you. Very cool. So I like this aspect of like the shadow back and forth. So the good. Let's do it. Let's do our overall. I love the world building. I just want to live in this cool spirit filled God inhabited forest of samurai. It's like really cool. Uh, I like the turn that, rather than a material fight, they're each trying to infect the other, with their, point of view. Shadow versus light, right? I think things to improve. Um, yeah, I mean, honestly, it's just like clean up the prose and some of the sentence level. In terms of the higher level notes, I did want to get more. I wanted to, understand Tomoe's motivation for, sacrificing her, for risking herself I don't know why these freaking headphones, man. Arctis, whatever. I need to get some new headphones. I do not like these ones. Oh, I'm old, man. I'm fading. But I wanted to, for risking yourself to save Eridan. Did she know him from before? Did her father force her? Why is she doing this? And then I think Eridan's like attack on her needs to be a bit more clear in terms of the physical risks versus the immaterial risks. Thanks for the sub, NW. I had to buy new headphones as well. Yeah, so kind. Look at that wonderful star falling in the cup. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Those subs, they go straight to coffee and caffeine, which, let's call a spade a spade. Stimulants are keeping this caffeine is keeping this stream running. So mine died in one lobe. Oof, that's rough. Yeah, like where you can't hear out of one ear. Oof, oof, oof. The material risks of infecting this pure being of Tomoe, the shadow. And I also like her struggle with the shadow. Also, seems to be core to the story, but it needs more specifics to emotionally land. What darknesses, dark aspects of Tomoe are there to tempt her? Does, why would she give this, chance to be a wraith? Serious thought. How else would you be going strong in the wee hours of the morning? Well, I appreciate it. Those subscriptions, they keep us in line. We still fight. All right, well, this was Duel at the Midnight Glade. So great job to the writer. The writer No Slumber on Twitch. So you should give them a follow. I don't know if they stream writing, or I don't even know if they... Yeah, but you should definitely give them a follow. So now, we're going to jump over to something completely different.